Okay, you need 4 index cards for this short lesson. And as we look at America's founding, it's important to understand that democracy comes in several different forms. And America's really kind of made up of several forms. We're not like a pure democracy where we all vote on everything, nor are we, purely some sort of elite system at all, but we're a mix of a bunch of different things. And that was very much on purpose, because each of those forms have weaknesses and they have strengths. And at the same time, the founders kind of wanted a little bit of each as kind of checks. So we'll see how that plays out. So here we go. 1.10. So card 10, unit 1, participatory democracy is the first one. You can look at that. I mean, look at the root word, participatory, participate. Okay, so participatory democracy is direct participation of many, if not most, people in society. Direct participation of many, if not most, people in society. You're going to see in the Federalist Papers, Madison calls it a pure democracy, and Hamilton uses that phrase as well, pure democracy, where, and usually you think of that as like a small area, like a town hall in New England, let's say. Another example historically was Athens, Greece, where all men, I believe above the age of 21, could vote, and they would meet in a forum and have conversations and debate and then actually vote. So there's an example of a forum. All right, so Athens, Greece. And then, Winston Churchill, he always said about democracy, though, democracy is the worst form of government except for all the others. So, democracy is kind of crazy and doesn't always work out well. But it's better than all the others, as Winston Churchill said. So it's not very clean. It's a little messy. And another example is the New England Town Hall. In the early, and this still happens in New England, where you have meetings where everybody meets and the town people who are registered to vote can actually vote on things, and there'll be an active debate. They don't necessarily have a town council or a mayor or something like that. It's where the town literally gets together and makes some collective decisions. On the left-hand side of the screen there, that's actually the town hall in my hometown, a little pipsqueak town in Maine called Pownell, where I grew up. And that's the town hall. And they would meet there and make decisions on taxes and whatnot. And then there's a historic painting of a New England town hall. And then in 1962, there was what was called the Port Huron Statement by a group of college-age students. And they put out this statement, and it was kind of like this classic modern version of democracy. And this was the idea that America needed to be more democratic, less republic-like in the way we did things. And so more democracy was better. That's debated, but certainly America has become more democratic in terms of how we do things over the history of our country. Port Huron Statement said, we seek to establish of a democracy of individual participation governed by 2 central aims: that the individual share in the social decisions determining the quality and direction of his life, and that society be organized to encourage independence in men and provide for the media for their common participation. So, this is just the idea that there should be more participation, not less. Okay, so participatory democracy. And modern participatory democracy, you could even argue that social media allows that. I would also argue that social media is exactly why founders feared democracy in a sense. They feared kind of a mob mentality where everybody starts to gang up on people and the minority gets pushed down and shouted down. And it can be ugly and fights break out, and it can actually break society apart. And that's probably true of certain parts of social media. There is definitely a mob mentality there where everybody's kind of follow the leader and you do it. And if you go against the grain, you're going to get shouted down and canceled. And so, that's the idea. But this bypasses traditional media and allows people to communicate. There are also 2 other types of participatory democracy that exist that came out of the progressive era around 100 years ago. They are the initiative, and Nevada is an example of the initiative. Several other states have it as well. I believe Nevada was one of the first to have the initiative, more active version of it. And I'll have a card on the initiative in a minute. And then the popular referendum, sometimes just known as the referendum. And my home state of Maine is a place that has the referendum. And I'll define both of those in just a second. You go ahead and write them down. All right, pause if you need to. I'm going to jump to the next card. All right, next card is 1.11, initiative and referendum. Initiative and referendum. So these are participatory examples. Participatory examples. All right, the initiative, yeah, you don't have to write participatory examples, but you can on the backside. One, citizens propose a law or constitution and a constitutional amendment, and they vote on it. So that's the initiative. The initiative comes from the citizens. They propose the law. Like literally, you as a citizen in in an initiative state, which by the way, Virginia does not have the initiative. You can propose a law or a constitutional amendment, and then the people vote on it. All right, next, a referendum. The citizens vote on a law passed by the legislature, and they might either to repeal or enact it. So the legislature passes a law, and then they say, well, we're going to send it to the people to decide. Kind of a little maybe a little cowardly by the legislature, like we don't really believe in what we're doing or we fear for our jobs, so we'll just send it to the people to decide, and then the people vote on it. So those are two examples, and 51, or 50% plus one vote, and guess what, it's a majority, and so therefore it gets enacted. And that maybe isn't the best way to make a law, because you don't have a lot of compromise. Like one side presents it and they have their side, and there's no compromise in writing it, and therefore you don't have maybe the best laws made in this process. I would argue, I think the founders would argue as well, that these aren't necessarily the best laws. But I will say, on the positive end, it does allow people to have a role in it. So I mean, that's really good. I mean, there's that aspect too, that it's really good that people get a say. All right. A pluralist democracy, or also known as pluralism. So card 12, pluralist democracy, or also known as pluralism. And you'll notice the root word is plural. That means many. All right. A pluralist democracy, backside. Pause it if you need to. So the idea here is that non-government interest groups organize. Okay, so you get a bunch of interest groups that could just be a group who believes in something. Okay, all kinds of interest groups, literally hundreds, thousands of them, to exert influence on political decision making. So interest groups get together to try to influence Congress people and senators and governors, and they try to influence the decisions that are made. Madison in the Federalist Papers, we're going to see, we'll call them factions. He'll call them factions. He argues that this is a natural state of life. Like we all join groups. Naturally, we'll join some group that we believe in. So it just, by the way, factions, you don't have to write this down, but factions are basically a group united by some passion, some sort of influence. You'll notice a bunch of different interest groups here: American Medical Association, the National Rifle Association, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, MAD, the Sierra Club, an environmentalist group, AARP, which is for elderly people. RP stands for retired persons. Greenpeace, ACLU. You see all kinds of interest groups. These are factions of American society where we all kind of break into small little groups and fight over things in the government. Labor unions, of course, would be included as well. These are all factions. All right. And the idea is that all these groups in America are fighting for their little piece of the pie. And then out of that comes policy, for good or worse, So a couple examples that I want you to write down. National Organization for Women, NOW. That was formed in the 1960s. So it's kind of really the second stage of the women's rights movement. More modern stage of the women's rights movement. They tend to be more liberal, more on the Democrat side, very much so, actually. B, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, which is more on the business side of things, much more conservative and Republican. And then there's also this idea of iron triangles. And iron triangles are a connection between the bureaucracy, which is government, people who work for government permanently, the legislature, and then the interest group. And then the interest group tries to influence the bureaucracy and the Congress funds the bureaucracy. We'll get into this. Just think iron triangles for now, and we'll explain it more later. All right, great. Move to the next one. And the last one is elitist democracy. And you look at the root word, right? Elite, like top, the best. Elite democracy is a form of democracy, but there's a limited number of people who are part of it. Small number of wealthy and or well-educated people influence government decisions. Small number of wealthy and or well-educated people influence government decisions. So notice, participatory, you're influencing. Pluralist, you're influencing, but only if you join a group. And then that group has power because of their size. The more size they have, the more money they have, the more influence they have. Now you have elite. So it's like, mostly lawyers or, well-educated doctors, people. They're the ones who influence government decisions. And, an example of this historic system, the British parliamentary system. Parliament was all elite for literally hundreds and hundreds of years. Around the time America became a nation, fewer than 2% of people in Britain could vote for parliament. And Britain was like one of the most democratic countries in the world. The only place where you could vote, more people could vote than Britain when we became a country was our country. That was it. More people could vote in America when we became a country than any country in the world. But not even close, actually. I mean, really, Britain and America were the only places that had the idea of like a vote. Every other country didn't have that. And then the modern, is electoral college. America's electoral college, which is how we select the president. And we're going to get into detail about that. It is an elite system because the idea is that we don't directly elect the president, but each state has so many votes based on their number of representatives and their number of senators. So every number you see, like Texas has 38 electoral votes. That means that Texas has 36 representatives and 2 senators. And then West Virginia has 5. That means they have 3 representatives and 2 senators. You always just take 2 off of the number, and that's how many reps they have. And then these people, the state gets to select electors who then get together a month after the election and select the president. Now, for the most part, we force by state law the electors to select the person who wins our state. So see Virginia in blue, that's for Democrat. Blue is Democrat, red is Republican on this map. And in Virginia, Virginia voted for Hillary Clinton. So the 13 electors had to vote for Hillary Clinton. And Hillary Clinton, matter of fact, gets to select the people that become electors. So this is kind of elite. Why? Because a small group are getting together and then selecting the president. Again, this isn't really a big deal because most of the time our votes select the president. But in the case of the Electoral College, the popular vote was won by Hillary Clinton by about 2 million votes. But Trump, if you add up all the numbers on the map here, if you look at all the numbers on the map on the red, he had more than Hillary. So he ended up winning because he won more states. Matter of fact, 30 states by Trump and 20 for Clinton. And she won some big population states like California, New York. But the total number, the raw number of electoral votes, because Trump wins 30 states, beat Hillary, 306 to 232. So that's the electoral. It is an elite system. All right, awesome. That kind of gives you the 4 three types of democracy and some examples. You need to study them. You need to then do your practices. I'm going to tell you over and over again, but I'm going to say it right now. Take the cards, study them for a minute, just like you would a good index card. If you want to make a quizzes or Quizlet or something like that to kind of practice it, that's fine. Go ahead and do that. And then you go ahead and take the practices. All right. Thanks, guys. Bye.